Today's video is sponsored by myself and my webshop tsmc.shop. Please go check it out. The new website is now live and we're constantly adding new products to get you a better shopping experience and the best possible tools and materials for your hobby needs. Recently, Elegoo came out with a new resin 3D printer, the Mars 5 Ultra. Now there's tons of interesting specs and features on this specific printer. However, I feel I'm not really the right one to tell you, as I'm more of a hobbyist and not an expert, so to speak. So I will be leaving a link in the description down below to the Elegoo website, which goes into a ton more detail, tells you everything about all of the specific features that make this printer special. And I'm just going to go over some of the test prints that I've done and also incorporate this printer into a project. After unboxing the printer, loading up some files that I wanted to test print, specifically for the Audi RS7 build that I'm still doing, I just quickly started the printer, as it does self-level, so no fuss there, and it came out pretty much perfectly on the first try, so that was really nice. I then moved on to selecting some of the files that I wanted to do for the build series to go in a bit more depth on the printer and what it is capable of, showcasing some of its highlights in some small parts and then making that into a kind of small build series, so to speak. So I decided on doing a Mercedes AMG GT63. This is a new model from AMG, or at least a new iteration on an already existing model, and I kind of like it. I'm not sure if the rest of the world likes it, but I do, and I found some files online for a model kit. It does come in a couple of different sizes, but with the Mars 5 being a smaller size printer, I decided to go for a 1/43 scale, as the 1/24 wouldn't really fit, and I don't really fancy printing the body in 3 or 4 different components and gluing them all together, so a 1/43 scale build would be perfect for me. The files were then loaded into Chitubox, that is the slicing software which you need for the parts to be printed. This sort of prepares them, and you can add all of the supports for the printing process and the parts to stick to the build plate. I simply just selected the 0.01 layer height. I adjusted the curing time per layer, and for the bottom layers a bit down so it prints a bit faster, specifically since I'm printing with fast resin from Elegoo. It doesn't really require super high curing times, and it can go really quickly. With all of the supports added, I sliced the files, saved it to the USB stick, loaded the resin into the printer, and then started printing. Something that I found quite interesting: usually the printing bed goes up and down, but in this case the resin vat actually goes up and down. The printing bed also goes up, but just very slightly, of course, but in this case the bed or the vat just goes up and down, and that kind of helps with releasing the prints from the bed a little bit better, I believe, or at least from the FEP film. That makes the prints a lot faster. I quickly just cleaned off all of the excess resin and put it into the cleaning machine with some isopropyl alcohol to clean off the rest and get the parts nice and crispy for me to use. I then also put it into the curing chamber to cure for about 5 to 10 minutes to get the parts fully cured and ready to be handled, and also prepared for paint. Now there are a couple of layer lines and some small imperfections due to some of the supports not being ideal, but those were quickly resolved in this following process. First of all, I decided to scribe out the panel lines to make them a little bit deeper so they wouldn't fade away during the sanding and priming process, as these are very small and could be a little bit deeper into the file itself, but nothing that can't easily be taken care of with a Panelline scriber. And keep in mind, this is a 1/43 scale, so it's a ton smaller than a 1/24. For the painting portion of this video, I kindly want to thank Fengda for sending out a couple of tools for me to use and test on this specific build. They've sent me out a new spray booth, which is really nice. It comes with 2 motors. You can turn one on for a lower suction capability and also turn on 2 at the same time for a higher capability, just pulling out all of the fumes a lot faster and better. Now it's really nice and quiet, and it's also a pretty nice and compact unit. You can even fold it up so it takes up a little less space. Alongside the spray booth, they also sent me out a compressor and an airbrush to use again for this project, and hopefully many more to come in the future. Now the price point on both the airbrush, the compressor, and even the spray booth is really nice and affordable, and the quality is pretty good too. Now the airbrushes are on the cheap side, so don't have too high of an expectation, but for the money it is still a really good unit and it does the job. Specifically, if you're getting into airbrushing for the first time, it's a nice budget-friendly airbrush to get into it, and it doesn't really matter all that much if you accidentally break something during your learning process. It can easily be replaced and doesn't cost a ton of money. The spray booth and compressor, on the other hand, also still nice and affordable, however it still offers really nice and high quality and also a great capability of getting rid of all the fumes and great pressure for the airbrush, keeping it nice and consistent and exactly where you set it to. If you are interested in checking out the airbrush, the compressor, or even the spray booth, I will be leaving links in the description down below, and I highly recommend you check those out to see if the spray booth, maybe even the compressor and or airbrushes are something that interest you. The spray booth and compressor are really highly recommended, specifically to get rid of all of the fumes, of course, and the compressor is just a really nice unit at a super affordable price. If you don't already have an airbrush but are interested in getting into it, they offer a really wide range of airbrushes which might be suitable for you. So during that little talk about all of the other stuff, I did sand and prime the body a couple of times to get rid of some print lines and imperfections from the printing process, depending on how you slice your files, angle them, etc. Some of you might be better at this than I am. You can get rid of a lot more of those lines and imperfections straight away, but since I'm more of a hobbyist and not an expert, I do tend to get it wrong sometimes and have some artifacts or imperfections in my prints. Now, no big deal. After sanding and priming about 3 times, getting rid of all of that and getting a nicely smooth body, I'm really happy with the way that it came out. Now, I wasn't really too sure about what color I wanted to use, so I went onto the online configurator for Mercedes and found a really nice cherry red color. Since I did not have the exact color in my range of paints available to me, I decided to go a different route and find one that matches closely and give it a bit of a custom touch. So I went for the Ford GT Liquid Red, which is already really nice and deep of a red, has a super nice metallic in it, and is a pretty good match to the color that I found online. However, I wanted to go that little extra step, and that is what I will be showing you a bit later on. First of all, the first coat was applied. I let that dry for about 10 to 15 minutes and then moved on to a second coat. It didn't really need much more as it's already covering incredibly nice and quickly straight on the first coat, so the second was pretty much just a coat to make sure that everything was covered. After that second coat was applied, another 10 to 15 minutes of cure time before I added the final coat, and that was going to be a candy red. So straight out of the bottle, I was already really impressed and satisfied with the color from the Ford GT, the liquid red. However, I wanted to give it a bit of an extra flair, a bit of extra depth and color to it, so I added 2 coats of candy red from Zero Paints on top. This just makes it a lot deeper and a lot cooler of a color, and since I haven't really used any candy colors on the channel yet, or at least not for a very long time, I figured it would be a nice change of pace. Now basically it is a transparent red you simply apply over your base colors. Now normally this would be a red, a silver or maybe even a gold base, but in this case I applied a red paint underneath, so that just enhances the red even more and doesn't need a ton of coats to cover. So I'm just going to go over the body with 2 coats, getting everything nice and even and giving a lot more depth and life to the color. On camera it's kind of hard to see, but these are the pictures from the body after the first couple of coats of the Ford Liquid Red, and then once the 2 coats of clear red were applied on top of it. On this picture it isn't really that visible, but on these ones with a bit of gloss into it, you can see that it totally changes the color, enhances it even more, and gives a bit more depth. Now that's it for the painting portion in this episode. In the meantime, I've printed off some more parts, and I will be adding some black details to the body as well, and of course some clear coat on it too, but that will have to wait for episode 2 next week. If you have any questions or are interested in the products that were featured in this video, do let me know down in the comments below, and also don't forget to check out the links.